The rain was coming down harder now, and Marcus Chen knew he should have been heading home. But something about the small figure hunched on the playground swing made him pause. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her dark hair plastered to her head, shoulders shaking with each sob that echoed across the empty park. What Marcus didn't know was that helping this child would lead him straight into the courtroom of Judge Harrison Blackwell, the same man who would decide the fate of his own daughter in just 3 weeks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. Maybe it came from years of working construction, where missing a detail could mean the difference between a stable foundation and a collapsed building. Or maybe it was just the way his mind worked, always scanning, always alert. That Tuesday evening in Riverside Park, his attention to detail would change 2 lives forever. He'd been walking back from the corner store, a gallon of milk in one hand, and his daughter, Emma's favorite cereal, tucked under his arm. The September air had turned crisp, and storm clouds had been gathering all afternoon. Most people had cleared out of the park hours ago, but there she was, a tiny figure in a yellow raincoat, sitting motionless on the swing set. Marcus slowed his pace. In the 3 years since his divorce, he'd become hyper-aware of children in distress. It was an occupational hazard of single parenthood, he supposed. Every crying kid in the grocery store made him think of Emma. Every lost-looking child at the mall triggered his protective instincts. This was different, though. This child wasn't throwing a tantrum or calling for a parent. She was eerily still, her small hands gripping the swing's chains, feet barely touching the ground beneath her. The rain had started as a light drizzle, but it was picking up momentum, and still she sat there. Marcus looked around the park. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for his truck and an old sedan that looked like it had been there for hours. No other adults in sight, no frantic parents searching the playground equipment, no one calling a child's name. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. As he got closer, he could hear the soft sound of crying, not the loud wails of a hurt child, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of someone who had given up hope that anyone was coming. "Hey there," Marcus said gently, stopping a few feet away from the swing set. "Are you okay?" The little girl looked up, and Marcus felt his heart clench. Her face was streaked with tears and rain, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She couldn't have been much older than Emma, maybe 6 or 7 at most. "I'm waiting for my daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the increasing patter of rain on the playground equipment. Marcus glanced around again. Still no sign of any adult who might belong to this child. "How long have you been waiting, sweetheart?" She shrugged, a gesture that seemed far too mature for someone her age. "A long time. Since after school." Marcus checked his watch. It was nearly 7 o'clock. If she'd been here since school let out, that meant she'd been sitting in this park for at least 3 hours. His jaw tightened. What kind of parent left a child alone for that long? "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her eye level. "Justine," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her sleeve. "Justine Blackwell." "Well, Justine Blackwell, I'm Marcus. And I think we need to get you somewhere dry before you catch pneumonia out here." Justine's eyes widened with panic. "But what if my daddy comes and I'm not here? He won't know where to find me." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He recognized that fear, that desperate need to be exactly where a parent expected you to be. Emma had gone through the same phase after the divorce, terrified that if she wasn't in the right place at the right time, one of her parents might disappear forever. "Tell you what," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "Why don't we call your daddy and let him know where you are? Do you know his number?" Justine nodded eagerly and rattled off a phone number. Marcus dialed, holding the phone to his ear as it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Harrison Blackwell. I'm unable to take your call right now, but please leave a detailed message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." The voice was deep, authoritative, with the kind of crisp diction that suggested education and position. Marcus waited for the beep. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Marcus Chen. I'm here at Riverside Park with your daughter Justine. She's been waiting for you for several hours, and it's starting to rain pretty hard. My number is 555-0047. Please call me back as soon as you get this." He hung up and looked at Justine, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. "I left a message for your dad," Marcus explained, "but it's really coming down now, and you're getting soaked. How about we wait in my truck where it's dry? That way, when your dad calls back, we can tell him exactly where to find you." Justine hesitated, clearly torn between stranger danger warnings and the increasingly uncomfortable reality of sitting in the rain. Marcus understood her dilemma. In her position, he'd want Emma to be cautious too. "I have a little girl about your age," Marcus said gently. "Her name is Emma, and she's at her mom's house tonight. If she was stuck in the rain somewhere, I'd hope a nice person would help her stay dry until I could get there." Something in his tone must have reassured her, because Justine nodded and slipped off the swing. Marcus took off his jacket and held it over her head as they hurried to his truck. Once inside, he cranked up the heat and handed her some napkins from the glove compartment to dry her face. "Better?" he asked. Justine nodded, settling into the passenger seat. She looked impossibly small, surrounded by the truck's interior, her yellow raincoat bright against the dark upholstery. "Do you live far from here?" Marcus asked, trying to keep the conversation light while they waited for her father to call back. "Kind of," Justine said. "We moved to the big house last month. Daddy says it's because he got a promotion, but I think it's because Mommy went away." Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest again. Divorce. Another family torn apart. Another child trying to make sense of adult decisions that seemed to make no sense at all. "That must be hard," he said simply. Justine nodded, her lower lip trembling slightly. "Daddy works a lot now. Mrs. Rodriguez is supposed to pick me up from school, but she didn't come today. I waited and waited, and then I walked here because Daddy brought me to this park once. I thought maybe he'd remember and come find me." The pieces were starting to come together in Marcus's mind. New house, new routine, confusion about pickup arrangements. He'd been through similar chaos during his own divorce proceedings. The difference was, he'd never left Emma sitting alone in a park for hours. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed the number he'd just dialed. "Hello? This is Harrison Blackwell. You called about my daughter." The voice was sharp, stressed, with an undertone of barely controlled panic. "Yes, sir, I'm Marcus Chen. I found Justine at Riverside Park. She said she's been waiting since after school." There was a pause, then a string of words that Marcus was glad Justine couldn't hear clearly. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Harrison said. "Don't go anywhere." The line went dead. Marcus looked at Justine, who was watching him expectantly. "Your dad's on his way," he said. "He'll be here soon." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the rain drumming steadily on the truck's roof. Marcus found himself studying this little girl who'd somehow ended up in his care. She had her father's dark hair, he noticed, but her eyes were different, softer, more expressive. She was clearly intelligent, articulate in a way that suggested she spent a lot of time around adults. "Are you a daddy?" Justine asked suddenly. "I am. My daughter Emma is 7. She lives with her mom most of the time, but she stays with me on weekends and Wednesday nights." "Do you miss her when she's not with you?" The question hit harder than Marcus had expected. "Every day," he said honestly. Justine nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "I miss my mommy every day too. Daddy says she needed to go find herself. But I don't understand why she had to go so far away to do it. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. He'd struggled with similar questions from Emma, who couldn't understand why Mommy and Daddy couldn't just live in the same house and be happy. Some adult problems were too complicated to explain to a child, too painful to examine too closely, even for the adults living through them. Headlights swept across the parking lot, and Marcus saw a black BMW pull up beside his truck. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit got out, his face grim with worry and what looked like barely controlled anger. "That's my daddy," Justine said, her voice small. Marcus got out of the truck and walked around to open Justine's door. The rain had softened to a light drizzle, but Harrison Blackwell looked like he'd been through a storm anyway. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, his dark hair slightly mussed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Justine," he called, his voice cracking with relief as she ran to him. He scooped her, up in his arms, holding her tight against his chest. For a moment, Marcus saw past the expensive suit and authoritative demeanor to the terrified father underneath. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Justine whispered against his shoulder. "Mrs. Rodriguez didn't." "Come, and I got scared." Harrison closed his eyes, his jaw working as he struggled to maintain composure. When he opened them again, his gaze fixed on Marcus with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "Thank you," he said simply. "I don't know how to repay you for this." Marcus shrugged. "Any parent would have done the same thing." Harrison studied him for a moment, as if trying to read something in his face. "Marcus Chen, you said." "That's right." Something flickered in Harrison's expression, recognition maybe, or surprise. But it was gone so quickly that Marcus wondered if he'd imagined it. "Well, Mr. Chen, I owe you a debt. If there's ever anything I can do for you—" Marcus was about to say that no thanks were necessary when Harrison's phone rang. He shifted Justine to one arm and answered it with his free hand. "Blackwell." "What? When?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Marcus apologetically. "Emergency at work. I have to go." "Of course," Marcus said. "I'm just glad everything worked out." Harrison nodded, but his expression had grown distant, preoccupied. He was already shifting back into whatever professional mode the phone call had demanded. "Thank you again," he said, carrying Justine toward his car. "Really, I won't forget this." As Marcus watched them drive away, Justine's small hand pressed against the rear window in a goodbye wave. He had no way of knowing that Harrison Blackwell had indeed recognized his name, or that in 3 weeks they would face each other across a courtroom, with Emma's future hanging in the balance. The storm was passing, but for Marcus Chen, the real turbulence was just beginning. Marcus spent the rest of that week thinking about Justine Blackwell more than he probably should have. There was something about the way she'd sat so perfectly still in that swing, waiting with the kind of patience that no 6-year-old should have to learn. It reminded him too much of the early days after his divorce, when Emma would sit by the window for hours, convinced that if she watched hard enough, she could somehow make her parents' marriage work again. The custody hearing was now just 2 weeks away, and Marcus felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach every time he thought about it. His lawyer, Patricia Hernandez, had been cautiously optimistic during their last meeting, but Marcus knew better than to get his hopes up. Family court was unpredictable at best, and his ex-wife Sarah had advantages he couldn't match: a stable job with regular hours, a new husband with a clean record, and a legal team that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. "You're doing it again," Emma said from across the dinner table, pulling him back to the present. "Doing what, sweetheart? That thing where you stare at your food but don't eat it. Mum says it means you're worried about something." Marcus looked down at his barely touched plate of spaghetti and managed to smile. "Just thinking about work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Emma rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair that only a 7-year-old could muster. Dad, I'm not stupid. I know you and Mom are going to court again. Mrs. Patterson at school said her parents went to court when they got divorced, and afterward she had to live with her dad all the time instead of going back and forth. The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened another notch. He'd tried so hard to keep Emma insulated from the legal proceedings, but kids were like emotional sponges. They absorbed everything, even the things adults thought they were hiding. Sometimes grown-ups have to go to court to figure out what's best for everyone, Marcus said carefully. But no matter what happens, you know that Mom and I both love you more than anything in the world, right? Emma nodded, but her expression remained serious. I know. I just wish everything could go back to how it was before. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know, baby. I wish that too sometimes. The next morning, Marcus dropped Emma off at school and headed to his job site. He was foreman on a downtown office renovation, the kind of project that should have been straightforward but had turned into a nightmare of permit delays and design changes. Normally, work was his escape, something concrete and fixable, where problems had solutions and progress was measurable. But today, even the familiar rhythm of construction couldn't quiet his restless thoughts. Around lunchtime, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Hernandez's office number. Marcus, I need you to come in this afternoon if you can manage it, Patricia said without preamble. We've got some new information about your case. What kind of information? The kind we need to discuss in person. Can you be here by 3? Marcus glanced around the job site. They were behind schedule as it was, but something in Patricia's tone made his chest tighten. I'll be there. Patricia Hernandez had been practicing family law for 23 years, and her office reflected every one of them. The walls were lined with case files, family photos from grateful clients, and certificates that documented her expertise in what she often called the messiest corner of the legal profession. She was a small woman with steel-grey hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, and Marcus trusted her completely. Sit down, she said as soon as he walked into her office. We need to talk about Judge Harrison Blackwell. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What about him? He's been assigned to your case. I just got the notification this morning. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying his expression. You look like you've seen a ghost. Do you know Judge Blackwell? Marcus's mind raced. Harrison, Blackwell, the man whose daughter he'd helped just a week ago, the father who'd looked at him with such intensity as if trying to place his face. The judge who would now decide whether Marcus got to keep his daughter. We've met, Marcus said slowly. Recently, actually. I helped his daughter when she was stranded at a park. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. You what? Marcus told her the whole story. Finding Justine alone at the playground, waiting for her father, the awkward exchange in the parking lot. As he spoke, Patricia's expression grew increasingly grim. This is not good, Marcus. Not good at all. Why? I helped his kid. If anything, shouldn't that work in my favor? Patricia shook her head. It doesn't work that way. Judges are supposed to be impartial, and any prior relationship, even a positive one, can be grounds for recusal. The problem is, if Blackwell recuses himself, it could delay your case by months, maybe longer, depending on the court's schedule. Marcus felt sick. And if he doesn't recuse himself? Then Sarah's lawyers could appeal any decision in your favor, claiming bias. It's a lose-lose situation. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Marcus thought about Emma, about the careful routine they'd built together, about Wednesday night dinners and weekend adventures that might be coming to an end. What do we do? He asked finally. We have a few options, Patricia said, pulling out a legal pad. We could file a motion requesting that Judge Blackwell recuse himself, but that means admitting to the prior contact and potentially delaying the case indefinitely. We could proceed as planned and hope that Blackwell maintains proper judicial distance, or you could consider Sarah's latest settlement offer: supervised visitation every other weekend, no overnight stays. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, downtown traffic moved in its usual chaotic patterns, people going about their normal lives while his world seemed to be collapsing. I'm not giving up, Patricia. Emma needs stability, and she gets that with me. Sarah's new husband is a good guy, but he travels constantly for work. Emma's going to be raised by nannies and after-school programs while Sarah focuses on her career. That's not what's best for her. I know how you feel, Marcus, but do you? Marcus turned back to face her. Do you know what it's like to see your kid only on weekends, to miss school plays and parent-teacher conferences because they're scheduled during mom's time, to watch your daughter slowly start to think of someone else's house as home? Patricia's expression softened. Actually, I do. I went through my own custody battle 15 years ago. I know exactly how it feels. Marcus deflated, sinking back into his chair. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. This is exactly why you're fighting so hard, and it's exactly why we're going to figure this out. Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on the determined tone that had won her dozens of difficult cases. Tell me more about your interaction with Judge Blackwell. Every detail you can remember. Marcus walked her through the evening again, this time focusing on Harrison's behavior, his words, his body language. The more he talked, the more he remembered details that hadn't seemed significant at the time. He recognized my name, Marcus said suddenly. When I introduced myself, something changed in his expression, like he'd heard it before. That's not surprising. He would have received case files weeks ago. He probably reviewed yours and remembered the name when you mentioned it. But there was something else. When his phone rang and he had to leave, he looked, I don't know, conflicted maybe? Like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Patricia made notes on her legal pad. Professional ethics would prevent him from discussing a pending case, especially outside the courtroom. If he recognized you as a party in a case he's scheduled to hear, the proper thing would be to end the conversation quickly and avoid any appearance of impropriety. So, what does that mean for us? It means Judge Blackwell was doing his job correctly. The question is whether he can continue to do it objectively. Patricia set down her pen and looked at Marcus directly. I'm going to do some research on Blackwell's previous rulings, see if I can get a sense of his judicial philosophy. In the meantime, you need to decide if you want to take the risk of proceeding with him on the bench. Marcus thought about Justine, sitting alone in that swing, waiting for a father who'd forgotten to arrange her pickup. He thought about the relief in Harrison's eyes when he'd found his daughter safe, and the way he'd held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. He loves his daughter, Marcus said quietly. Whatever else is going on in his life, however busy he is with work, he loves that little girl. I saw it in his face. That doesn't necessarily mean he'll rule in favor of fathers in custody cases. Marcus, judges are trained to separate their personal experiences from their professional decisions. I know, but maybe it means he'll understand what's at stake here. Maybe he'll see that kids need their fathers, not just on weekends, but every day. Patricia nodded slowly. All right, we proceed as planned. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. If you encounter Judge Blackwell again before the hearing, at the grocery store, at a school event, anywhere, you turn around and walk away. No conversations, no acknowledgements beyond a polite nod. We can't afford any more complications. Marcus agreed, though privately he wondered how likely it was that their paths would cross again. Riverside was a decent-sized city, and they moved in completely different circles. Harrison Blackwell lived in the expensive neighborhoods on the Northside sent his daughter to private school, drove a BMW that cost more than Marcus made in a year. The chances of running into him were slim to none. He was wrong about that, but he wouldn't find out until the following Saturday, when Emma's soccer game would put him face to face with the man who held his future in his hands. That evening, Marcus picked Emma up from Sarah's house as usual. The handoff was awkward, as it had been ever since the lawyers got involved. Sarah stood in the doorway while Emma gathered her backpack and soccer cleats, her new husband David hovering supportively in the background. "Don't forget, she has practice. At 9 tomorrow morning," Sarah said, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes, "and her uniform needs to be washed." "I know the schedule, Sarah. I've been taking her to practice for 2 years. I'm just making sure. With the hearing coming up, I want to make sure everything goes smoothly." Marcus bit back the response that came to mind. Everything had been going smoothly until she decided to challenge their custody arrangement. Emma had been thriving with their current schedule, happy and well-adjusted despite the divorce. But Sarah's new marriage had apparently given her new ideas about what their family should look like. "Ready, Dad?" Emma appeared at his elbow, backpack slung over her shoulder. "Ready, kiddo." As they drove toward Marcus's apartment, Emma chattered about her week at school, a math test she'd aced, and drama with her best friend Sophia. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half occupied with thoughts of Judge Harrison Blackwell and the hearing that would determine their future. "Dad, you're doing it again," Emma said as they pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. "Doing what?" "The staring thing. Are you nervous about my soccer game tomorrow?" Marcus realized he'd been gripping the steering wheel tight enough to leave marks. "No, sweetie. I love watching you play." "Good, because I think we're going to win. This time, Coach Martinez says our defense is getting really strong, and Ashley's been practicing her corner kicks all week." They spent the evening watching a movie and working on Emma's science project, a model of the solar system that was due Monday. Marcus helped her paint Jupiter's red spot while she explained everything she'd learned about gas giants and orbital periods. These were the moments he treasured most, the quiet, ordinary interactions that built the foundation of their relationship. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to imagine what life would look like if he lost the custody case. Weekends only, every other holiday, summer vacations split down the middle. He'd become a visitor in his daughter's life, watching her grow up in increments instead of being there for the daily milestones. That really mattered. His phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia. "Found some interesting info about Judge Blackwell. Call me Monday." Marcus stared at the message, wondering if interesting was good news or bad news. In his experience with the legal system, it was usually the latter. He was about to turn off the lights and head to bed when his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something made him answer anyway. "Hello? Mr. Chen? This is Harrison Blackwell. I hope I'm not calling too late." Marcus's blood ran cold. Judge Blackwell was calling him directly? This couldn't be happening. "Judge Blackwell, is everything okay? Is Justine all right?" "Justine is fine. Well, that's actually why I'm calling. She's been asking about you all week, about the nice man who helped her at the park. She wanted me to thank you again." Marcus didn't know what to say. Patricia's warnings echoed in his head. No contact, no conversations beyond a polite nod. But how do you hang up on a judge? "I'm glad she's okay," Marcus said carefully. "She is, thanks to you. Look, I know this is unusual, but I wanted to call, personally, to express my gratitude. What you did, most people would have just kept walking. Any parent would have done the same thing." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, well, I also wanted to let you know that I've become aware of our professional connection. I want to assure you that what happened at the park will have no bearing on my judicial decisions." Marcus's mouth went dry. Harrison knew about the custody case, knew that he would be presiding over it, and he was calling anyway. This was exactly the kind of contact that could derail everything. "Judge Blackwell, I appreciate the call, but maybe we shouldn't—" "You're right, of course. This was inappropriate. I apologize. I'll see you in court, Mr. Chen." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in disbelief. Judge Harrison Blackwell had just called him at home 2 weeks before a custody hearing to discuss their prior interaction. Either the man had terrible judgment about professional boundaries or something else was going on. Marcus thought about calling Patricia immediately, then decided it could wait until morning. She was going to have a lot to say about this development, and none of it was going to be good news. Outside his apartment window, the city hummed with its usual Friday night. Energy, traffic, music, the distant sound of laughter from a nearby restaurant. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that their futures didn't hang in the balance of a single court hearing. Marcus envied them more than they could possibly know. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. Marcus woke early, despite having tossed and turned most of the night thinking about Harrison Blackwell's phone call. He made pancakes for Emma, her favorite Saturday morning tradition, and tried to push the conversation, with the judge out of his mind. Today was about soccer, about watching his daughter play the sport she loved, about being a normal dad doing normal dad things. Emma bounced around the kitchen while she ate, already dressed in her bright blue uniform, her long hair pulled back, in the tight ponytail that Coach Martinez required for games. The Riverside Rapids were having their best season in years, and Emma had scored 3 goals in their last 2 games. She was becoming quite the little athlete, something that filled Marcus with pride, even as it reminded him of how much of her life he might miss if the custody case went badly. "You're bringing the orange slices, right, Dad?" Emma asked between bites of pancake. "Already cut and in the cooler," Marcus assured her, "along with the water bottles and the first aid kit." "Good. Last week, Tommy Hendricks got a bloody nose, and his mom totally freaked out because she didn't bring anything to clean it up." "It was so embarrassing," Marcus smiled. At 7 years old, Emma had already developed strong opinions about proper game day preparation. She took her soccer seriously, but she also had a keen eye for the social dynamics of youth sports. She could tell him which parents were too competitive, which kids were struggling with confidence, and which families were dealing with problems at home. They arrived at Riverside Community Park 20 minutes before game time, giving Emma a chance to warm up with her teammates while Marcus helped set up the sideline equipment. The opposing team, the Westfield Warriors, had already claimed the better side of the field, their parents setting up elaborate camping chairs and canopies that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. "Fancy crowd today," said Janet Morrison, whose daughter Ashley played midfielder for the Rapids. Janet was a single mom like Marcus, though her ex-husband had moved across the country after their divorce and rarely saw their daughter. She understood the weight of being a child's primary emotional support system. "Westfield always brings the full production," Marcus replied, pulling folding chairs out of his truck. "Last time we played them, they had a professional photographer taking action shots. Must be nice to have that kind of money to throw around," Janet said, but there was no real bitterness in her voice. Both of them had learned to focus on what they could provide rather than what they couldn't. The game started with the usual chaos of 7-year-old soccer. A pack of kids chasing the ball around the field like a swarm of bees, parents shouting, encouragement from the sidelines, coaches trying to remember which children were supposed to be playing, which positions. Emma started at right wing, her favorite spot, and Marcus could see her scanning the field with the same focused attention she brought to everything else in her life. 15 minutes into the first half, the Rapids scored their first goal. Not Emma this time, but her teammate Sophia, who managed to break away from the pack and kick the ball into the lower left corner of the net. The Riverside parents erupted in cheers, Marcus among them, his voice carrying across the field as he called out encouragement. It was during the celebration that he noticed the man standing alone on the far sideline, apart from the cluster of Westfield parents. Tall, well-dressed, despite the casual Saturday morning setting, with the kind of posture that suggested authority and control. Marcus's stomach dropped as recognition hit him like a physical blow. Judge Harrison Blackwell was watching the game from across the field. Marcus's first instinct was to grab Emma and leave immediately, but she was in the middle of playing, completely absorbed in the game and unaware of the crisis developing on the sideline. He couldn't just drag her away without explanation, and he couldn't explain without revealing details about the custody case that he'd worked so hard to keep from her. His second instinct was to call Patricia Hernandez, but what could she do? Tell him to leave, file an emergency motion claiming harassment. The judge wasn't doing anything wrong by watching a youth soccer game. For all Marcus knew, he was there for some other child entirely. But as the game continued, Marcus became increasingly aware of Harrison's presence. The judge wasn't cheering for either team, wasn't engaging with other parents, wasn't even paying consistent attention to the action on the field. Instead, he seemed to be watching the sidelines, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the cluster of Rapid's parents where Marcus stood. "Everything okay?" Janet asked, noticing his distraction. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just thinking about work stuff," Marcus lied, forcing himself to focus on Emma, who was racing down the field with determination written all over her face. The second half began with Westfield scoring the equalizer, a lucky bounce off the goal post that found its way into the net despite the best efforts of the Rapids goalkeeper. The Westfield parents erupted in celebration, but Marcus noticed that Harrison didn't join in. He stood quietly, his hands clasped behind his back, watching everything with the detached interest of someone observing a social experiment. With 10 minutes left in the game, Emma got her chance. The ball came to her off a corner kick, and she found herself alone in front of the goal, with only the keeper to beat. Marcus held his breath as she wound up for the shot, her small body coiled with concentration and determination. The ball sailed past the goalkeeper's outstretched hands and into the upper right corner of the net. A perfect shot, the kind that coaches dream about and parents remember forever. Marcus jumped up from his chair, shouting his daughter's name as she was mobbed by her teammates. The other Rapids parents joined in the celebration, a chaos of cheers and high fives that filled the air with pure joy. For a moment, Marcus forgot about everything else. The custody case, the judge on the far sideline, the phone call that had kept him awake all night. There was only Emma, running toward him with the biggest smile he'd ever seen, her arms outstretched for the victory hug they'd shared after every goal she'd scored this season. "Did you see that, Dad? Did you see that shot?" "I saw it, kiddo. That was incredible. Coach Martinez is going to be so proud." Emma beamed as her teammates surrounded them, chattering excitedly about the goal and the game and their chances in next week's tournament. Marcus soaked it all in, trying to memorize every detail of the moment. If things went badly in court, these Saturday morning celebrations might become a lot less frequent. As the team gathered for their post-game huddle, Marcus began packing up the sideline equipment. The Westfield parents were already loading their elaborate setups into their SUVs, probably heading to some upscale restaurant for a team lunch that would cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a week. "Mr. Chen," Marcus looked up to find Harrison Blackwell standing beside his truck, close enough that avoiding conversation was no longer an option. The judge looked uncomfortable, his usual air of authority replaced by something that resembled uncertainty. "Judge Blackwell." Marcus kept his voice neutral, professional. "I didn't expect to see you here. My daughter plays for Westfield, number 14. Marcus glanced toward the field, where the Warriors were having their own team meeting. A small Girl with dark hair was listening intently to her coach, her posture and attention so similar to Emma's that Marcus felt a pang of recognition. This was Justine, the child he'd helped at the playground, looking completely different in her soccer uniform, but unmistakably the same serious, thoughtful little girl. "She's a good player," Marcus said, because it was true. He'd noticed number 14 during the game, a skilled midfielder who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. "She is. She's been working very hard this season." Harrison paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Mr. Chen, about last night's phone call." "Judge Blackwell, I don't think we should—" "Please, let me finish." Harrison's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "I made an error in judgment calling you. It was inappropriate, and I apologize. I want to assure you that it won't happen again." Marcus nodded, unsure how to respond. Patricia had warned him about exactly this kind of contact. But now that it was happening, he found himself curious about the man behind the judicial robes. Harrison looked tired, stressed in a way that went beyond the usual pressures of his job. "I also want you to know," Harrison continued, his voice dropping lower, "that I've given serious consideration to recusing myself from your case. The ethical implications of our prior contact are complex, and I've decided that recusal would not serve the interests of justice. I am confident in my ability to remain impartial, and delaying your case would only prolong the uncertainty. For everyone involved, especially the children." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "The children? Your daughter Emma, my daughter Justine. All the children whose lives are affected when parents can't resolve their differences outside of court." Harrison's gaze drifted toward the field, where both teams were finishing their huddles. "I see a lot of families in my courtroom, Mr. Chen, more than I'd like to, and I've learned that the longer these cases drag on, the more damage they do to the people they're supposed to protect. So you're not recusing yourself." "I am not. I will hear your case as scheduled, and I will make my decision based solely on the evidence presented and the best interests of your daughter. Nothing more, nothing less." Marcus wanted to ask what that meant, wanted some hint of how Harrison viewed the case, but he knew better. The judge had already said more than he should have, and pushing for additional information would only make things worse. "I understand," Marcus said simply. Harrison nodded, then looked toward the Westfield huddle, where Justine was gathering her equipment. "I should go. Justine and I have plans this afternoon." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Your daughter played beautifully today. That last goal was exceptional. Thank you. Soccer is a wonderful sport for children. It teaches teamwork, perseverance, how to handle both victory and defeat with grace, important life lessons." Marcus watched him go, wondering if there had been a deeper message in those words. Harrison walked over to the Westfield huddle and placed a gentle hand on Justine's shoulder, bending down to listen as she chattered excitedly about something that had happened during the game. The transformation was immediate and complete. The stern judge disappeared, replaced by a father who was genuinely interested in his daughter's experiences. "Who was that?" Emma asked, appearing at Marcus's elbow with her soccer bag slung over her shoulder. "Just another parent," Marcus said. "Ready to go get some lunch?" "Can we go to Tony's? They have the best pizza and I'm starving. Tony's it is." As they drove toward the restaurant, Emma kept up her usual post-game chatter, analyzing every play and goal with the seriousness of a professional commentator. Marcus listened and responded appropriately, but part of his mind was still back at the soccer field, replaying his conversation with Harrison Blackwell. The judge had seemed genuinely torn about the ethical implications of their situation, but ultimately decided that he could remain impartial. Marcus wanted to believe that was true, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their interactions had already changed something fundamental about their relationship. How do you remain impartial towards someone whose child you've held in your arms? How do you separate the grateful father from the objective judge? At Tony's Pizza, they found a booth in the back corner, away from the lunch crowd. Emma ordered her usual pepperoni and extra cheese, while Marcus tried to focus on being present for this moment with his daughter. But his mind kept wandering. To the courtroom, to Patricia's research on Harrison's judicial record, to the phone call that had crossed so many professional lines. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Emma's voice was unusually serious. "Of course, sweetheart, what's on your mind? Are you and Mom really going to court again?" Marcus's heart sank. Despite all his efforts to protect her from the legal proceedings, Emma was too smart and too observant to be completely shielded from what was happening. "Yes, we are. But it's not because we're angry at each other. It's because we both love you very much, and we want to make sure you're taken care of properly." "But I already am taken care of. I like spending time with both of you." "I know you do, and no matter what happens, that's not going to change. You'll always have both of us in your life." Emma considered this, twirling a strand of cheese around her finger. Mrs. Patterson's parents went to court, and afterward she only got to see her dad on weekends. I don't want that to happen to us. Marcus reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Okay, the most important thing is that you know how much I love you, and that's never going to change." Emma nodded, but Marcus could see the worry in her eyes. 7 years old, and she was already learning that the adults in her life couldn't always protect her from uncertainty and change. It was a lesson no child should have to learn so young. As they finished their pizza and headed home, Marcus found himself thinking about Harrison Blackwell's words on the soccer field. Soccer teaches how to handle both victory and defeat with grace. Important life lessons. In 10 days, Marcus would find out which lesson he'd be teaching his daughter. Monday morning brought Patricia Hernandez's phone call earlier than Marcus had expected. He was barely awake when his phone rang at 6:30, the sound cutting through the pre-dawn quiet of his apartment like an alarm bell. "We need to talk immediately," Patricia said without preamble. "Can you be at my office by 8? Marcus rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess. "What's wrong? I'll explain when you get here. And Marcus, don't talk to anyone about your case between now and then. Not your neighbors, not your co-workers, not your barista, nobody." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in confusion. Patricia wasn't typically dramatic, which meant whatever she'd discovered was serious enough to warrant emergency protocols. He showered quickly, made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and headed downtown with a growing sense of dread. Patricia's office building was one of those converted warehouses that tried to balance historical charm with modern functionality. At 8 in the morning, the lobby was nearly empty, except for a security guard who waved Marcus through without looking up from his newspaper. The elevator seemed to take forever, giving him too much time to imagine worst-case scenarios. Patricia was waiting for him with a stack of files spread across her conference table and an expression that could have curdled milk. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "We have a problem. Actually, we have several problems, but let's start with the big one." She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of what appeared to be court transcripts, highlighted in yellow and annotated with Patricia's careful handwriting. "I spent the weekend researching Judge Harrison Blackwell's judicial record," she began. 22 years on the bench, specializing in family law for the last 12. Overall, his rulings show a slight bias toward joint custody arrangements, which should work in our favor. That sounds like good news. It would be if that were the whole story, but buried in his case history, I found something interesting. 3 years ago, Judge Blackwell presided over his own divorce proceedings. Marcus looked up sharply. He was the judge in his own divorce? No, he was the defendant. His wife filed for divorce and primary custody of their daughter. The case was sealed, as most celebrity divorces are, but I have contacts in the clerk's office who were able to give me some basic details. Patricia pulled out another file, this one thicker than the first. Rebecca Blackwell, a successful interior designer, filed on grounds of irreconcilable differences. She claimed that Harrison's dedication to his career made him an absent father, that Justine needed more stability than he could provide with his demanding schedule. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The parallels to his own case were unmistakable. A career-focused parent being challenged by an ex-spouse who claimed to offer better stability for their child. What was the outcome? Joint custody with Harrison, getting primary physical custody during the school year, and Rebecca getting summers and extended holidays. But here's the interesting part. Rebecca moved to California 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She's essentially become a long-distance parent, seeing Justine maybe 4 times a year. So Judge Blackwell won his custody battle. He did. And from what I can tell, he's been fighting the same demons you are, trying to balance a demanding career with single parenthood, dealing with judgment from people who think fathers can't provide the same level of care as mothers. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. No wonder Harrison had looked so conflicted during their conversations. He wasn't just presiding over another custody case. He was reliving his own. "There's more," Patricia continued. "I did some digging into Sarah's legal team. Turns out they tried to get Judge Blackwell recused from another case last year, claiming he was biased in favor of fathers. The motion was denied, but it shows they're aware of his history. Do you think they'll try the same thing with my case?" "They might, especially if they find out about your prior contact with him, which brings me to the next problem." Patricia's expression grew even more serious. "I got a call from opposing counsel this morning. They want to depose you about your relationship with Judge Blackwell." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "How do they know about that?" "Good question. My guess is someone saw you talking at the soccer game and reported back. Youth sports in this town are basically a social networking event for the upper middle class. Word travels fast." Marcus thought about the elaborate setup of the Westfield parents, their professional photographer, the way they'd all seemed to know each other. Of course, someone had noticed the conversation between Harrison and him. In a community that size, gossip was practically a competitive sport. "What do I tell them?" "The truth, all of it. The playground incident, the phone call, the conversation at the soccer game. We get ahead of this before they can spin it into something worse than it is." Patricia stood and walked to the window, her silhouette sharp against the morning light. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. In any of your interactions with Judge Blackwell, did he say anything that could be construed as discussing your case? Any comments about custody, about father's rights, about the legal system?" Marcus replayed their conversations in his mind, searching for anything that might be problematic. At the soccer game, he mentioned that he sees a lot of families in his courtroom and that longer cases do more damage to the children involved. But he was talking in general terms, not about my specific situation. That's borderline, but probably not enough to force a recusal. What about the phone call? He thanked me for helping Justine and said he wanted to assure me that the playground incident wouldn't affect his judicial decisions. Then he apologized for calling and said it was inappropriate. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. Actually, that might work in our favor. It shows he was aware of the ethical implications and tried to address them proactively. Still not smart of him to call, but it demonstrates good faith. She returned to her seat and pulled out a legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to contact opposing counsel and offer to make you available for deposition immediately. We'll be completely transparent about everything that happened, and we'll emphasize that Judge Blackwell acted appropriately throughout your interactions. And if they still try to get him recused, then we fight it. A father helping a lost child doesn't create the kind of personal relationship that would disqualify a judge. from hearing a case. And frankly, I think Judge Blackwell's personal experience might actually help us. He knows what it's like to be a single father fighting for custody. He understands the stakes. Marcus wanted to feel reassured by her confidence, but something was nagging at him. Patricia, what if this whole thing backfires? What if they argue that Judge Blackwell is too sympathetic to fathers, that he can't be objective because of his own divorce? That's a risk we'll have to take. The alternative is to request a new judge ourselves, which could delay the case by months and still might not work in our favor. At least with Blackwell, we know where we stand. They spent the next hour preparing for the deposition, going over every detail of Marcus's interactions with Harrison Blackwell until Patricia was satisfied that there were no surprises waiting to ambush them. By the time Marcus left her office, he felt marginally more confident about their strategy, though the knot in his stomach had only grown tighter. The deposition was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon in Sarah's lawyer's downtown office. Marcus had been through depositions before, during the original divorce proceedings, but this felt different, more adversarial, with higher stakes and less room for error. Sarah's lead attorney was a woman named Victoria Sterling, whose reputation for aggressive tactics was matched only by her success rate in high-profile cases. She was exactly the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to win at any cost, and her presence on Sarah's legal team had been a source of concern for Marcus from the beginning. "Mr. Chen," Sterling began once the court reporter had sworn him, "and they'd like to discuss your relationship with Judge Harrison Blackwell." "We don't have a relationship. We've met 3 times in casual circumstances." "Let's talk about those circumstances. The first meeting was at Riverside Park on September 15th, correct?" Marcus confirmed the date and walked through the playground. Incident once again, sticking to the facts and avoiding any editorializing. Sterling listened impassively, occasionally making notes on her legal pad. "And during this interaction, did Judge Blackwell mention that he was a judge?" "No, he introduced himself as Harrison Blackwell, and I didn't know his profession until later." "When did you learn that he was a judge?" "When my attorney told me he'd been assigned to my custody case." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "So, you had no knowledge of Judge Blackwell's position when you helped his daughter?" "None whatsoever." "I see. Now, let's discuss the phone call you received from Judge Blackwell on October 8th. Marcus recounted the conversation as accurately as he could remember, emphasizing Harrison's acknowledgement that the call was inappropriate and his assurance that their prior meeting wouldn't influence his judicial decisions. "Did it strike you as odd that a sitting judge would call a party in a case he was scheduled to hear?" "Yes, I thought it was unusual." "Did you consider reporting this contact to the Judicial Ethics Board?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was, he hadn't even known there was a Judicial Ethics Board, much less considered filing a complaint. "No, I didn't." "Why not?" "Because Judge Blackwell was calling to thank me for helping his daughter and to clarify that our prior meeting wouldn't affect the case. It seemed like he was trying to do the right thing." Sterling made another note. "Let's move on to the soccer game on October 16th. You spoke with Judge Blackwell at your daughter's game, correct?" "Briefly, yes. Can you describe that conversation?" Marcus walked through the encounter at the soccer field, including Harrison's comments about recusal and his decision to proceed with the case. Sterling's expression remained neutral, but Marcus could sense her building towards something. "Mr. Chen, during this conversation, did Judge Blackwell make any comments about the nature of your custody case?" "He mentioned that he sees a lot of families in his courtroom and that longer cases are harmful to children, but he was speaking in general terms." "Did he express any opinions about fathers' rights or custody arrangements?" "No." "Did he comment on your daughter's soccer performance?" Marcus frowned. "He said she played beautifully and that her goal was exceptional." "And how did that make you feel?" The question caught Marcus off guard. I was proud of Emma. Any parent would be pleased to hear their child complimented. But this wasn't just any parent, was it? This was the judge who will decide whether you get to continue seeing your daughter on a regular basis. Patricia leaned forward. Objection. Argumentative. Sterling smiled coldly. I'll rephrase. Mr. Chen, did Judge Blackwell's compliment about your daughter create any sense of optimism about how he might rule in your custody case? Marcus thought carefully before answering. I hoped it meant he could see that Emma and I have a good relationship, but I didn't interpret it as any kind of promise about the outcome of the case. The deposition continued for another hour, with Sterling probing every detail of Marcus's interactions with Harrison Blackwell, looking for any evidence of impropriety or bias. By the time it was over, Marcus felt like he'd been through a psychological evaluation rather than a legal proceeding. How do you think it went? He asked Patricia as they walked to the parking garage. Better than I expected. Sterling was fishing, but she didn't find anything substantive. The most she can argue is that Judge Blackwell showed poor judgment in calling you, but that's not grounds for recusal. So, we're still on track for next week? Unless something else surfaces, yes. The hearing is scheduled for Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. We'll have our final prep session Monday afternoon. As Marcus drove home, he tried to feel optimistic about their chances. The deposition had gone well. Judge Blackwell seemed inclined to rule fairly, and Emma's best interests were clearly served by maintaining their current arrangement. But something Sterling had said kept echoing in his mind. This was the judge who will decide whether you get to continue seeing your daughter on a regular basis. In 6 days, Harrison Blackwell would hold Marcus's future in his hands. The man who'd called to thank him for helping Justine, who'd watched Emma score her goal with obvious admiration, who'd struggled with the same custody battle Marcus was now fighting. The question was whether any of that would matter when they faced each other across a courtroom. The weekend before the custody hearing stretched endlessly for Marcus, each hour crawling by with the weight of impending judgment. Emma was with Sarah, following their usual schedule, which left Marcus alone with his thoughts and a level of anxiety that coffee couldn't touch. He'd cleaned his apartment twice, reorganized his toolbox, and called his sister in Phoenix just to hear a familiar voice that wasn't connected to lawyers or court proceedings. You sound terrible, Maya had said during their Sunday afternoon conversation. When's the last time you actually slept? Sleep is overrated, Marcus replied, though the truth was he'd been averaging about 3 hours a night since the deposition. Every time he closed his eyes, he replayed his conversations with Judge Blackwell, searching for hidden meanings in every word and gesture. Marcus, listen to me. You're a good father. Emma adores you. No judge in their right mind is going to take that away from her. Judges in their right mind don't usually call the parties in cases they're about to hear, Marcus said, immediately regretting the bitter tone in his voice. What does Patricia think? Patricia thinks we have a solid case. She also thinks Judge Blackwell's personal experience will work in our favor. But Patricia didn't sit in that deposition listening to Sarah's lawyer turn every innocent interaction into evidence of judicial misconduct. Maya was quiet for a moment. Are you having second thoughts about fighting this? The question hit harder than Marcus had expected. Was he having second thoughts? Every lawyer's bill brought him closer to financial ruin. Every court date put Emma through more stress and uncertainty. Sarah's offer of supervised weekend visits would at least guarantee some relationship with his daughter, even if it wasn't what he wanted. I can't give up, Maya. Emma needs to know that I fought for her, that I believed she was worth fighting for. If I roll over now, what message does that send? It sends the message that you love her enough to put her needs first, even when it hurts. But Marcus had already made his choice, and there was no backing down now. Tuesday morning would bring either vindication or devastation, and he was committed to seeing it through. Monday evening brought Emma back to his apartment for their weekly dinner together. She seemed quieter than usual, more subdued, and Marcus wondered how much of the tension she was picking up from the adults around her. Kids were emotional barometers, sensitive to changes in atmospheric pressure that adults thought they were. Hiding, how was your weekend with Mom? Marcus asked as they sat down to Chinese takeout from their favorite restaurant. Good. We went to the mall and bought new shoes for school, and David took me to the Science Museum. Emma pushed her fried rice around her plate without much enthusiasm. Dad, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Is tomorrow the day you and Mom go to court? Marcus's chopsticks froze halfway to his mouth. Despite all his efforts to shield Emma from the legal proceedings, she'd somehow figured out the timeline. Yes, it is. Are you scared? The question was so direct, so innocent, that Marcus felt his throat tighten. A little bit, yes. Emma nodded seriously. I'm scared too. What are you scared of, kiddo? I'm scared that the judge won't understand, that I need both of you. Mrs. Patterson's judge didn't understand that, and now she only sees her dad on weekends, and she's always sad on Mondays. Marcus set down his chopsticks and reached across the table to take Emma's hand. Hey, look at me. No matter what happens tomorrow, you're always going to have both Mom and me in your life. That's not going to change. But what if it does change? What if the judge decides I can only see you sometimes instead of all the time? The fear in her voice broke Marcus's heart. 7 years old, and she was already learning that the adults who were supposed to protect her couldn't always keep their promises. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. The judge's job is to decide what's best for you, and what's best for you is having both of your parents involved in your life. I believe that, Mom believes that, and I think the judge will see that too. But what if he doesn't? Marcus struggled for an answer that would be honest without being terrifying. Then we'll figure out how to make the best of whatever decision he makes. But I'm not going to stop being your dad, no matter what happens. That's not something any judge can change. They finished dinner with lighter conversation about school and soccer and Emma's upcoming science fair project. But Marcus could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. After she went to bed, he sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, staring at his phone and debating whether to call Patricia one more time. Instead, he found himself thinking about Harrison Blackwell, alone in his own house somewhere across town, probably struggling with similar thoughts about fairness and justice and the weight of decisions that would reshape a family forever. The judge had his own daughter to consider, his own experience with custody battles and the aftermath of divorce. Did that make him more likely to understand Marcus's position, or would it create the kind of emotional distance that professional ethics demanded? Marcus was still awake at midnight when his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Good luck tomorrow. You're a good father. H. He stared at the message for a long time, his thumb hovering over the reply button. Judge Harrison Blackwell had just sent him a personal message 12 hours before their custody hearing. It was either the most inappropriate communication in the history of family court, or it was the gesture of one father to another, a recognition of shared humanity beneath their legal roles. Marcus deleted the message without responding, and turned off his phone. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, and some gestures were too dangerous to acknowledge. Tuesday morning arrived grey and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that seemed designed to match Marcus's mood. He dressed carefully in his best suit, the navy blue one he'd bought for job interviews and weddings, and tried to eat breakfast despite having no appetite whatsoever. His hands were steady as he knotted his tie, but his reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a man facing a firing squad. The courthouse was the imposing building of grey stone and tall windows, designed to inspire respect for the law and intimidate anyone who might challenge it. Marcus had been here twice before for procedural hearings, but today felt different. Today, everything would be decided. Patricia was waiting for him in the lobby, looking professional and confident in a way that Marcus envied. She'd been through hundreds of these hearings, had seen every possible outcome, and learned to manage her emotions accordingly. For her, this was just another Tuesday morning. At work, for Marcus, it was the most important day of his life. "Ready?" she asked, adjusting her briefcase strap. "As ready as I'll ever be." They took the elevator to the 4th floor, where Family Court Division held its proceedings. The hallway was crowded with lawyers, litigants, and family members, all waiting for their cases to be called. Marcus recognized some faces from his previous visits: the divorce attorney who'd handled his original proceedings, a social worker who'd been involved in Emma's custody evaluation, other parents whose lives had been similarly disrupted by legal battles over the people they loved most. "Chen versus Chen," Patricia said, checking the docket posted outside courtroom. 4B. "We're third on the calendar. Should be called around 10:30. Sarah was already there with her legal team, sitting on a bench near the courtroom doors. She looked elegant and composed in a charcoal grey suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a style that suggested both professionalism and maternal competence. David sat beside her, offering moral support and probably paying the legal bills that Marcus couldn't afford. Victoria Sterling stood nearby, reviewing files with the focused intensity of a general preparing for battle. When she noticed Marcus, she offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. This was a woman who enjoyed winning, and she'd built a career on dismantling fathers who thought they could challenge the traditional assumptions about custody and care. "All rise." The Honourable Judge Harrison Blackwell presiding. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation in the hallway, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was it. After weeks of preparation, hours of deposition, and sleepless nights of worry, the moment had finally arrived. They filed into the courtroom in order of precedence. Sarah's team first, followed by Marcus and Patricia. The room was smaller than Marcus had expected, with wood-panelled walls and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in a harsh, institutional glow. Judge Blackwell's bench dominated the front of the room, elevated and imposing, designed to remind everyone present that justice flowed from this single point. Harrison entered from a side door, his black robes lending him an authority that went far beyond his already considerable presence. He looked older than he had at the soccer game, more formal, with the kind of controlled expression that revealed nothing about his thoughts or intentions. This was Judge Blackwell, not the worried father who'd called to thank Marcus for helping his daughter. "Good morning," Harrison said, settling into his chair and opening the case file. "We're here today for the matter of Chen versus Chen, regarding custody modification for the minor child Emma Chen. Counsel, please state your appearances for the record." Victoria Sterling rose first. Victoria Sterling of Sterling, Hughes and Associates, representing the petitioner, Sarah Chen Morrison. Patricia followed. Patricia Hernandez of Hernandez Family Law, representing the respondent, Marcus Chen. Harrison nodded and reviewed his notes. "I've read both parties' filings, and I understand this case involves a request to modify the current joint custody arrangement to grant primary physical custody to the petitioner. Ms. Sterling, you may begin." Sterling approached the podium with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case she truly wanted to win. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is fundamentally about stability and what's best for 7-year-old Emma Chen. While we acknowledge that Mr. Chen loves his daughter, love alone is not sufficient to provide the consistent, structured environment that Emma needs to thrive." She launched into her opening argument with practiced precision, painting a picture of Marcus as a well-meaning but ultimately inadequate parent whose unpredictable work schedule and modest resources made him unsuitable for primary custody. She emphasized Sarah's recent marriage to David Morrison, a successful marketing executive who could provide financial stability and a traditional two-parent household. Marcus listened to his life being dissected and found wanting, his devotion to Emma reframed as an inability to provide proper care. According to Sterling, his construction job was too physically demanding and dangerous, his apartment too small, his income too irregular. The fact that Emma thrived under his care, that she was happy and well-adjusted, somehow became evidence that she would be even better off with less time in his presence. Furthermore, Your Honor, Sterling continued, we have concerns about Mr. Chen's recent interactions with this court that suggest a troubling disregard for appropriate boundaries and professional ethics. Marcus felt Patricia tense beside him. This was the moment they'd been dreading, when his innocent act of helping a lost child would be twisted into evidence of manipulation or misconduct. Mr. Chen deliberately sought out contact with Your Honor. Outside of these proceedings, engaging in what can only be described as ex parte communication designed to influence this court's decision. Harrison's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught a slight tightening around his eyes. Are you alleging misconduct, Miss Sterling? I'm alleging poor judgment, Your Honor. Mr. Chen helped Your Honor's daughter at a public park, then engaged in multiple subsequent contacts, including a conversation at a youth soccer game. While these interactions may have been innocent on their face, they demonstrate a pattern of behavior that raises questions about Mr. Chen's respect for appropriate boundaries. Patricia was already rising to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Sterling is mischaracterizing the evidence. Mr. Chen helped a lost child, as any decent person would do. He had no knowledge of Your Honor's identity at the time, and all subsequent contacts were initiated by others or occurred in public settings where avoidance would have been more inappropriate than acknowledgement. Harrison held up a hand. I'll hear argument on this issue, but I want to be clear from the outset that my decision in this case will be based solely on the best interests of the minor child. Any personal interactions I may have had with the parties are irrelevant to that analysis, Sterling smiled. Of course, Your Honor, but character and judgment are certainly relevant factors in custody determinations, and we believe Mr. Chen's actions demonstrate questionable decision-making that extends beyond his relationship with this court. The hearing was off to exactly the kind of start Marcus had feared. Instead of focusing on his relationship with Emma, they were relitigating his encounters with Judge Blackwell, turning his moment of Good Samaritan impulse into evidence of character defects. But as he watched Harrison's face, Marcus thought he detected something that looked almost like approval in the judge's expression. A father recognizing another father's instinct to protect a child in need, regardless of the legal complications it might create. The real battle was just beginning. Patricia's response was swift and surgical. She approached the podium with the measured confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this exact moment since the case began. Your Honor, Ms. Sterling's characterization of events is not only inaccurate, it's deliberately misleading. Mr. Chen encountered a distressed child, alone in a public park during a rainstorm. He did what any responsible adult would do. He ensured the child's safety and contacted her parent. To suggest that this act of basic human decency somehow demonstrates poor judgment is not only wrong, it's offensive. Patricia paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. The evidence will show that Mr. Chen is exactly the kind of father Emma needs, attentive, responsible, and committed to her well-being above all else. His work schedule, while demanding, is stable and allows him to be present for school events, soccer games, and the daily moments that matter most in a child's life. She gestured toward Marcus. Mr. Chen doesn't have unlimited financial resources, but he has something far more valuable, unlimited love for his daughter and the dedication to prove it every single day. The current custody arrangement works because Emma thrives in both households, and disrupting that stability serves no one's interests except those who mistake wealth for wisdom. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Ms. Sterling, please call your first witness. The petitioner calls Dr. Rachel Whitman. Dr. Whitman was a child psychologist who'd conducted Emma's custody evaluation 6 months earlier. She was a professional witness, the kind of expert who made a living testifying in family court cases, and her credentials were impressive enough to lend weight to whatever conclusion she'd reached. Sterling guided Dr. Whitman through her qualifications before moving to the substance of her evaluation. Doctor, in your professional opinion, what would be the optimal custody arrangement for Emma Chen? Based on my evaluation, I believe Emma would benefit from increased stability and structure. While both parents are loving and capable, the child expressed some anxiety about the frequent transitions between households. Primary residence with one parent, combined with regular visitation with the other, would reduce this stress. And which parent do you recommend for primary custody? Doctor. Whitman consulted her notes. Mrs. Chen Morrison presents a more traditional family structure with her recent marriage, and her career in marketing provides more predictable hours and income stability. Mr. Chen's construction work involves irregular schedules and some safety risks that, while manageable, do create additional variables in the child's routine. Marcus felt his chest tighten. The psychologist was reducing his relationship with Emma to a risk assessment, as if love and dedication could be measured in safety statistics and income brackets. Patricia's cross-examination was thorough and pointed. Dr. Whitman, during your evaluation, did Emma express any preference about where she wanted to live? She indicated that she enjoys spending time with both parents and would prefer not to choose between them. Did she express any concerns about her father's work or living situation? No specific concerns. She seemed comfortable and happy in both environments. In fact, didn't she tell you that she looks forward to Wednesday dinners with her father because they cook together and talk about her day? Dr. Whitman shifted uncomfortably. She did mention enjoying their routine, yes. And didn't she describe her father as the best listener in the world during one of your sessions? I believe those were her words, yes. Patricia pressed on. Doctor, your recommendation for primary custody with the mother, was that based on specific deficiencies you observed in Mr. Chen's parenting, or on general assumptions about family structure and financial stability? I based my recommendation on multiple factors, including yes or no, doctor. Did you observe any specific deficiencies in Mr. Chen's parenting during your evaluation? Dr. Whitman hesitated. No, I did not observe any deficiencies. Thank you. No further questions. The morning continued with testimony from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez from Emma's after-school program, and David Morrison, Sarah's new husband. Each witness painted a picture of a child who was loved and well cared for by everyone in her extended family, which only made the custody battle seem more unnecessary and potentially harmful. David's testimony was particularly frustrating for Marcus to hear. The man was genuinely likable, clearly devoted to both Sarah and Emma, and obviously well-intentioned. Under different circumstances, Marcus might have appreciated having someone like David in Emma's life, but listening to him describe his plans for Emma's future, private schools, music lessons, family vacations to Europe, felt like watching someone else write the script for his daughter's childhood. Mr. Morrison, Patricia said during cross-examination, you've been in Emma's life for approximately 18 months, correct? That's right. And in that time, have you observed any problems with Emma's current custody arrangement? David glanced toward Sarah before answering. Emma seems well-adjusted overall, but she has mentioned sometimes feeling confused about which house to call home. Did she specifically say she was unhappy spending time with her father? No, she didn't say that. Has she ever expressed any desire to see her father less frequently? Not to me, no. Patricia nodded. Mr. Morrison, you travel extensively for work, don't you? According to your own testimony, you're away from home approximately 1 week per month. My travel schedule varies, but yes, I do travel for business. So, while you can provide financial stability, you wouldn't actually be present in the home any more than Mr. Chen currently is, would you? David looked uncomfortable. I suppose that's mathematically possible, but thank you. No further questions. The lunch recess provided a brief respite from the emotional intensity of the hearing, but Marcus found he had no appetite for the sandwich Patricia had brought from the courthouse cafeteria. They sat in a small conference room down the hall from the courtroom, reviewing their strategy for the afternoon session. How do you think it's going? Marcus asked. Better than I expected. Sterling's witnesses haven't really established any compelling reason for change, and Judge Blackwell seems engaged with the actual facts rather than the inflammatory rhetoric. But we're not out of the woods yet. This afternoon, they'll call Sarah to testify, and she can be very compelling when she wants to be. Marcus knew that was true. Sarah had always been articulate and persuasive, able to present her perspective with a clarity that made disagreement seem unreasonable. It was one of the qualities that had attracted him to her in the first place, back when they were young and foolish enough to believe that love could overcome any obstacle. What about Emma? Will they call her to testify? Patricia shook her head. Judge Blackwell rarely allows children to testify in custody cases unless there are allegations of abuse or neglect. He believes it's too traumatic for kids to be forced to choose between their parents in open court. When court reconvened, Sterling called Sarah to the witness stand. She looked composed and sympathetic, the picture of a concerned mother fighting for her child's best interests. Her testimony was carefully crafted to emphasize her stability, her commitment to Emma's future, and her concerns about the current arrangement's impact on their daughter. Mrs. Chen Morrison, Sterling began, can you describe Emma's demeanor when she returns from visits with her father? She's often tired and sometimes anxious. The transition back and forth is hard on her, and I worry about the long-term effects of this constant upheaval. Have you observed any specific behaviors that concern you? Sarah nodded. Emma sometimes has trouble sleeping after spending time at Marcus's apartment. She's mentioned that the traffic noise keeps her awake, and the walls are thin enough that she can hear the neighbors arguing. It's not the peaceful environment a child needs for proper rest. Marcus felt a surge of anger. Sarah was describing his apartment as if it were some kind of urban nightmare, when the truth was that Emma had never complained about noise or expressed any discomfort with her living situation there. What changes are you hoping to achieve through this custody modification? I want Emma to have a stable home base where she can focus on her education and development without the constant disruption of moving between households. She would still see Marcus regularly, but she needs the security of knowing where she belongs. Patricia's cross-examination was respectful but pointed. Mrs. Chen Morrison, you agreed to the current custody arrangement 2 years ago, correct? Yes, but circumstances have changed. What circumstances? Has Emma's academic performance declined? No, her grades are excellent. Has she developed behavioral problems? Not exactly, but has she expressed unhappiness with spending time with her father? Sarah hesitated. She's never said she doesn't want to see him. In fact, hasn't she told you on multiple occasions how much she enjoys her time with Mr. Chen? She loves her father, of course. Mrs. Chen Morrison, isn't it true that your desire to modify custody only arose after your marriage to Mr. Morrison? David and I believe we can provide a better environment for Emma. Better than a loving relationship with both of her parents? Sterling objected, and Harrison sustained it, but the point had been made. Sarah's motivation wasn't Emma's well-being, it was her own desire to create a new family dynamic that positioned Marcus as a visitor rather than a parent. The afternoon wore on with testimony from character witnesses and experts, each side building their case with careful precision. Marcus found himself studying Harrison's face, looking for any sign of how the judge was processing the information. But Harrison maintained the neutral expression of judicial professionalism, giving nothing away. Finally, Sterling called her last witness, Emma's school counselor, who testified about a conversation in which Emma had mentioned feeling pulled in different directions by her parents' expectations. It was thin evidence, the kind of comment any child of divorce might make, but Sterling presented it as proof that the current arrangement was causing psychological harm. "Your Honor," Patricia said when her turn came, "the respondent calls Marcus Chen." Marcus had been dreading this moment, being questioned under oath about every aspect of his parenting, his relationship with Emma, his hopes for their future. But as he walked to the witness stand, he felt a strange sense of calm settling over him. This was his chance to speak directly to Judge Blackwell, to explain what Emma meant to him and why fighting for her was worth any amount of legal fees or emotional trauma. Patricia guided him through his testimony with practiced ease, establishing his work history, his involvement in Emma's daily life, and his commitment to her education and development. Marcus described their Wednesday night dinners, their weekend adventures, the way Emma helped him plan her birthday parties and choose Christmas presents for her mother. "Mr. Chen," Patricia said, "why is maintaining the current custody arrangement important to you?" Marcus looked directly at Harrison as he answered, "Because Emma needs to know that both of her parents are committed to being active parts of her life. She needs to see that love isn't something you schedule for weekends and holidays. It's something you live every day. I can't give her the financial advantages that Sarah and David can provide, but I can give her something equally valuable. The knowledge that her father will always be there for her, not as a visitor, but as a parent." Sterling's cross-examination was aggressive and personal, designed to rattle him and expose any weaknesses in his character or judgment. She questioned his financial stability, his work schedule, even his decision to help Justine at the playground. "Mr. Chen, when you encountered Judge Blackwell's daughter at the park, did you see an opportunity to gain favor with the court?" "No. I saw a scared little girl who needed help. But you were aware that you had a custody case pending?" "Yes, but I had no idea who Justine's father was. I would have helped any child in that situation. Even knowing that it might complicate your legal proceedings?" Marcus paused, considering his answer carefully. "Ms. Sterling, if you saw a 6-year-old child sitting alone in the rain, would you keep walking because it might be inconvenient? For your lawsuit?" Harrison's expression shifted slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but Marcus caught it. A flash of something that might have been approval or recognition or shared understanding between one father and another. "No further questions," Sterling said, apparently deciding that continuing this line of questioning was counterproductive. As Marcus returned to his seat, he felt like he'd said what needed to be said. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen, but he'd been honest about his love for Emma and his commitment to being the father she deserved. "Your Honor," Patricia said. The respondent rests. Harrison consulted his notes and the courtroom clock. "We'll take a 15-minute recess, after which I'll hear closing arguments." During the break, Marcus tried to read Harrison's body language, looking for any clue about which way the decision might go. But the judge remained professionally neutral, reviewing his files and speaking quietly with his clerk about scheduling matters. The closing arguments were passionate and compelling from both sides. Sterling painted a picture of a child caught between two worlds, needing the stability that only primary custody could provide. Patricia countered with the fundamental principle that children benefit from strong relationships with both parents, and that disrupting a working arrangement served no one's interests. Finally, Harrison looked up from his notes and addressed the courtroom. "I'll be taking this matter under advisement. Both parties will receive written notification of my decision within 2 weeks. Court is adjourned." As the gavel fell, Marcus realized that everything he'd worked for, everything he'd hoped for, now rested in the hands of the man whose daughter he'd helped on a rainy Tuesday evening. The irony wasn't lost on him. His future as a father might be decided by someone who understood exactly what that future meant. Now all he could do was wait. The 2 weeks that followed the custody hearing felt like 2 years. Marcus threw himself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, volunteering for overtime shifts and weekend projects that kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. But even the physical exhaustion of 10-hour days couldn't quiet the anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in his chest. Emma seemed to sense the tension, though she didn't ask directly about the court proceedings. During their Wednesday dinner, she was more subdued than usual, picking at her favorite pasta while studying his face with the perceptive gaze that reminded him so much of himself at that age. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked finally, setting down her fork with the deliberate precision of someone who'd been rehearsing the question. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired from work." "You've been tired a lot lately." Emma considered this for a moment. "Mrs. Patterson says her dad was really tired before the judge made his decision too, but then he got better after." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd tried so hard to shield Emma from the legal proceedings, but children absorbed everything, filing away details that adults thought they'd successfully hidden. "Sometimes grown-ups have to deal with complicated things that make them worry," Marcus said carefully, "but that doesn't mean you need to worry too. Whatever happens, you know I love you, right?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I love you too, Dad, and I think the judge will understand that." Her simple faith in the system's fairness was both heartbreaking and inspiring. At 7 years old, Emma still believed that adults in positions of authority would naturally do the right thing, that justice was as inevitable as sunrise. Marcus envied her certainty and prayed that Judge Harrison Blackwell would prove worthy of it. The notification arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by registered mail to Patricia's office. Marcus was at a job site in the industrial district when his phone rang, the familiar number appearing on his screen like a verdict in itself. "Marcus, the decision is in," Patricia said without preamble. "Can you be here in an hour? Is it good news or bad news? Just get here. We'll review it together." The drive to Patricia's office passed in a blur of traffic lights and second-guessing. Marcus tried to read meaning into her tone, but Patricia was too experienced to reveal anything over the phone. By the time he reached her building, his hands were shaking enough that he had trouble with the elevator buttons. Patricia was waiting, with the official court documents spread across her conference table, her expression carefully neutral. She gestured for him to sit across from her, then slid the papers forward without comment. "In the matter of Chen versus Chen," Marcus read aloud, "regarding modification of custody for the minor child Emma Chen, this court finds as follows." The legal language was dense and formal, full of clauses and statutory references that meant nothing to him. Marcus skipped ahead, scanning for the conclusion that would determine his future. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, this court finds that the current custody arrangement serves the best interests of the minor child and should be maintained without modification. The petitioner's motion for primary physical custody is hereby denied. Marcus read the sentence 3 times before the words sank in. He'd won. Judge Harrison Blackwell had ruled in his favor, rejecting Sarah's attempt to reduce him to a weekend visitor in his daughter's life. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Why did he rule for us?" Patricia smiled for the first time since the hearing. "Keep reading." Judge Blackwell included an unusually detailed explanation of his reasoning. Marcus found the relevant section and began reading aloud again. The court notes that both parties are loving, capable parents who have demonstrated genuine commitment to their child's welfare. However, the evidence presented does not support a finding that the current arrangement is detrimental to the child's best interests or that modification would provide meaningful benefits. The judge's analysis continued for several paragraphs, methodically dismantling each of Sarah's arguments. He noted that Emma was thriving academically and socially under the current arrangement, that she had expressed no desire for change, and that both households provided appropriate care and supervision. But it was the final paragraph that took Marcus's breath away. This court is particularly struck by the testimony regarding Mr. Chen's character and judgment, as evidenced by his actions both in court and in the community. His willingness to assist a child in distress, despite not knowing the potential consequences for his own legal proceedings, demonstrates exactly the kind of moral compass and parental instinct that serves children's best interests. The court finds no basis for concluding that Emma Chen would benefit from reduced contact with her father. Marcus looked up at Patricia, who was grinning openly now. "He turned your good deed into evidence of good character. Brilliant move on his part. But what about all the ethical concerns? Sarah's lawyers made such a big deal about my contact with Judge Blackwell. Read the footnote at the bottom of page 3. Marcus flipped to the designated page and found a small print addendum that addressed the ethics issue directly. The court acknowledges that the respondent and this court had limited personal contact prior to these proceedings. However, said contact arose from circumstances beyond either party's control and involved no discussion of this case or related legal matters. The court has reviewed the interactions in question and finds no evidence of impropriety or attempted influence. To the contrary, both parties conducted themselves appropriately given the unusual circumstances. Patricia leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied. Harrison Blackwell just gave a masterclass in judicial reasoning. He addressed every concern Sterling raised, protected himself from appeal, and made it clear that your character was an asset, not a liability. Marcus felt a wave of relief so intense it left him dizzy. For weeks, he'd been carrying the weight of potential loss, imagining a future where Emma became a stranger, where their Wednesday dinners and weekend adventures turned into supervised visits and awkward exchanges. Now, suddenly, that future had evaporated, replaced by the continuation of the life they'd built together. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you go home and call your daughter. The custody arrangement remains exactly as it was before Sarah filed her motion. You win, Marcus. You get to keep being Emma's father on your own terms." The drive home was completely different from the anxiety-ridden trip to Patricia's office. Marcus found himself noticing things he'd missed for weeks: the way autumn light filtered through the trees, the sound of children playing in neighborhood parks, the simple pleasure of moving through the world without the constant weight of impending judgment. He called Emma from his apartment, catching her during her after-school snack time at Sarah's house. "Dad," she said, her voice bright with the uncomplicated joy that made everything else worthwhile. "Guess what? I got an A on my science project. Mrs. Henderson said my volcano was the most realistic one she'd ever seen." "That's fantastic, kiddo. I'm so proud of you. Are you still tired from work? You sound different." Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "I'm feeling much better, actually. Everything's gonna be okay." "Good. I don't like it when you're worried. It makes me worried, too." "Well, You don't need to worry anymore. I love you. Emma, I love you too, Dad. See you tomorrow for dinner. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his kitchen and tried to process what had happened. Judge Harrison Blackwell, the man whose daughter he'd helped on a random Tuesday evening, had just ensured that Marcus could continue being the father Emma needed. The irony was profound, but so was the justice of it. His phone rang again, this time showing Patricia's number. I forgot to mention something, she said. Sarah's team has 30 days to file an appeal, but honestly, I don't think they will. Judge Blackwell's ruling is so thorough and well-reasoned that an appeal would be expensive and unlikely to succeed. So, this is really over. This is really over. Congratulations, Marcus. You fought for your daughter and you won. That evening, Marcus found himself driving past Riverside Park, the place where everything had started. The playground was empty now, the swings moving gently in the autumn breeze. He thought about Justine Blackwell, sitting alone in the rain, waiting for a father who'd forgotten to arrange her pickup. He thought about his own father, who'd walked away when Marcus was 12 and never looked back. He thought about the chain of events that had brought him to this moment. A custody case decided by a judge who understood exactly what it meant to fight for your child. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your victory. Justine and I are both grateful for your kindness. HB. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing his response. Thank you for your fairness and wisdom. Emma is lucky to have you looking out for her interests. 3 dots appeared immediately, showing that Harrison was typing a reply. Good fathers recognize other good fathers. Take care of that little girl. Always, Marcus typed back. Saturday arrived with Emma's soccer game, the first one since the custody decision. Marcus arrived early to help set up the field, feeling genuinely relaxed for the first time in months. The other parents noticed the change in his demeanor, commenting on how much better he looked, how the stress seemed to have lifted from his shoulders. Emma played beautifully, scoring 2 goals and assisting on a 3rd. But what Marcus enjoyed most was simply watching her move with the uninhibited joy of a child who knew she was loved and supported, who didn't have to worry about adult problems or legal proceedings that might change her world without warning. During halftime, he noticed a familiar figure on the far sideline. Judge Harrison Blackwell stood apart from the other Westfield parents, watching his daughter Justine with the intense focus of someone who understood how precious these moments were. When their eyes met across the field, Harrison raised his hand in a brief wave, a gesture between fathers who'd found themselves on opposite sides of a courtroom, but shared the same fundamental commitment. After the game, as both teams gathered, for the traditional post-game snacks, Justine approached Marcus with the shy smile of a child who remembered his kindness. Mr. Chen, she said quietly, thank you for helping me that day at the park. You're very welcome, Justine. I'm glad you're okay. She nodded seriously, then looked toward her father, who was walking over to join them. Mr. Chen, Harrison said, formally but with warmth in his eyes. I hope Emma enjoyed the game. She did. Both girls played wonderfully. They did indeed. Harrison paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. I wanted you to know that justice isn't always easy to find. In family court, I'm glad we were able to find it in your case. Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. Thank you, Your Honor, for everything. Harrison smiled. Just Harrison will do. We're both just fathers here. As they walked away, Justine skipping ahead, while Harrison followed with the measured pace of a man who'd learned to pay attention to the moments that mattered, Marcus felt a profound sense of completeness. The custody battle was over, Emma was safe in his life, and the future stretched ahead of them, filled with Wednesday dinners and soccer games and all the ordinary miracles of being a father. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep clutching The trophy from her soccer tournament, Marcus sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee and thought about the strange journey that had brought him to this point. A crying girl on a swing set, a judge who understood what it meant to fight for your child, a legal system that had somehow managed to reach the right conclusion despite all its flaws and complications. His phone lit up with a text from Emma, sent from Sarah's house. "Dad, I'm so happy everything worked out. Mom explained that I get to keep living with both of you. I love you so much." Marcus typed back, "I love you too, kiddo. Sweet dreams." Outside his window, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy, full of families navigating their own complicated relationships and legal challenges. But inside his apartment, everything was exactly as it should be. Emma would come home tomorrow for their weekly dinner. They'd work on homework together, and the routine that had been threatened would continue uninterrupted. Sometimes justice did prevail. Sometimes good deeds were rewarded rather than punished. Sometimes a single act of kindness toward a stranger's child could ripple outward in ways that transformed everyone involved. Marcus Chen was still a single father with a demanding job and an uncertain financial future. But he was also a man who'd fought for what mattered most and won, whose daughter would grow up knowing that love wasn't conditional on court orders or custody schedules. In the end, that was all any father could ask for. The rain that had brought him and Justine together that Tuesday evening had long since passed, but the bonds forged in its wake, between a father and daughter, between justice and mercy, between strangers who'd found unexpected common ground, would last for years to come. 6 months after the custody hearing, Marcus's life had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and miraculous. The constant anxiety that had shadowed his daily routine for so long was gone, replaced by the comfortable certainty that Emma would continue to be a permanent part of his world. Their Wednesday dinners had evolved into elaborate cooking experiments, with Emma taking increasing responsibility for menu planning and preparation. Last week, she'd successfully made homemade pasta from scratch, her small hands working the dough with serious concentration while flour dusted every surface in his kitchen. "Dad, I want to try making sushi next," Emma announced during their most recent dinner, twirling lomen noodles around her chopsticks with practiced ease. "Ashley's mom showed us how to roll California rolls, and it doesn't look that hard." "Sushi it is," Marcus agreed, making a mental note to research local fish markets that sold sashimi-grade ingredients. Emma's culinary ambitions had grown exponentially since the court case ended, as if the security of their arrangement had freed her to explore new interests without worrying about disruption. Their Saturday soccer games had become community events, with Marcus volunteering as assistant coach and Emma emerging as one of the team's most reliable players. The Riverside Rapids were having their best season in years, and Emma had developed into a natural leader on the field, encouraging younger players and celebrating everyone's successes with genuine enthusiasm. It was during one of these games that Marcus noticed Judge Harrison Blackwell approaching the sideline, where he stood with his clipboard and water bottles. The judge looked more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen him, wearing jeans and a team sweatshirt instead of his usual formal attire. "Marcus," Harrison said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually. Thank you for asking." They stood together watching their daughters play, the awkwardness of their courtroom encounter long since replaced by the easy camaraderie of parents who shared similar experiences and values. "Justine's been asking about Emma constantly," Harrison said. "Apparently they've become good friends at school, bonding over their shared love of science projects and soccer strategy." Marcus wasn't surprised. Both girls possessed the same focused intensity, the same thoughtful approach to problems that probably served them well, both academically and athletically. Emma mentioned that Justine helped her with her volcano demonstration, said she knew all about chemical reactions from watching you cook. Harrison laughed. She's become quite the little chef since the divorce. We've been working our way through a children's cookbook with mixed results. Last week's attempt at beef stew was educational. The conversation was comfortable, natural, stripped of the legal formality that had characterized their earlier interactions. Marcus found himself genuinely liking this version of Harrison Blackwell, not the intimidating judge who'd held his future in his hands, but the single father who struggled with the same daily challenges of parenting that Marcus faced. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said during a break in the game action. "When you were deciding my case, did our prior meeting make it harder to be objective?" Harrison considered the question carefully. "Actually, it made it easier. I knew from personal experience what kind of man would stop to help a stranger's child, what that said about character and priorities. The legal arguments were important, but seeing you in action as a father, that told me everything I needed to know about what kind of decision would truly serve Emma's best interests. I still can't believe Sarah's lawyers tried to make it seem like I planned the whole thing. People who don't understand genuine compassion often assume it must be calculated." Harrison watched Justine execute a perfect corner kick, his pride evident. The truth is, good fathers recognize other good fathers. It's not something you can fake or manufacture for the benefit of a court case. The game ended with another Rapids victory, Emma scoring the winning goal with 30 seconds left on the clock. As the team celebrated, Marcus felt the familiar surge of pride that came with watching his daughter succeed through her own effort and determination. After the post-game team meeting, Emma and Justine approached their fathers together, still wearing their grass-stained uniforms and championship grins. "Dad," Emma said, "Justine invited me to her birthday party next weekend. Can I go?" Marcus looked at Harrison, who nodded. "Of course she can come. It's just a small gathering at our house. Pizza, cake, and probably too much sugar for anyone's good." "I'd love to have Emma there," Justine added shyly. "She's my best friend at school." The simple declaration carried more weight than either girl probably realized. In the space of a few months, their friendship had become a bridge between two families whose lives had intersected in the most unlikely circumstances. "I'll pick her up and drop her off," Marcus offered. "What time works for you?" They exchanged contact information and made arrangements, the transaction as normal as any other parental coordination. Looking at their daughters chatting excitedly about party plans, Marcus marveled at how completely the children had moved past the adult complications that had once seemed so overwhelming. The following Saturday, Marcus drove Emma to Harrison's house in one of Riverside's more exclusive neighborhoods. The home was elegant, but not ostentatious, with a large backyard where a dozen 7-year-olds were already engaged in elaborate games involving water balloons and strategic alliances. Harrison met them at the front door, wearing an apron that read "Birthday Dad," and looking slightly overwhelmed by the controlled chaos happening in his living room. "Emma!" Justine called from across the room, abandoning a puzzle to run over and hug her friend. "Come see the cake my dad and I made. It's shaped like a soccer ball." As Emma was swept into the party activities, Harrison walked Marcus to the kitchen, where an impressive spread of child-friendly food covered every available surface. "You've outdone yourself," Marcus observed, noting the homemade decorations and carefully planned activities. "Justine only gets one 7th birthday. I wanted to make sure it was memorable." Harrison poured himself a cup of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been working overtime. "Plus, planning events helps me feel more in control when everything else in life feels unpredictable." Marcus understood completely. Single parenting required a constant balance between providing stability and adapting to changing circumstances, between meeting your child's needs and maintaining your own sanity. How are you managing the work-life balance? Marcus asked. I imagine being a judge doesn't exactly offer flexible hours. It's challenging. I've had to make some difficult choices about cases I take and travel I accept. But watching Justine thrive makes every sacrifice worth it. Harrison glanced toward the living room, where the party guests were engaged in an elaborate treasure hunt. What about you? Construction work can't be easy to coordinate with parenting schedules. It has its advantages. Most of my projects are local, and I've built relationships with contractors who understand that my daughter comes first. The money isn't always predictable, but the flexibility is worth more than any salary. They were interrupted by a group of children seeking arbitration for a dispute about treasure hunt rules, which Harrison handled with the diplomatic skill that had probably served him well on the bench. Marcus watched him navigate the complex social dynamics of 7-year-old Justice with patience and humor, noting how naturally he balanced authority with warmth. The party continued for another 2 hours, filled with games, presents, and enough sugar to power a small city. Emma threw herself into every activity with characteristic enthusiasm, forming quick friendships with children she'd never met and displaying the social confidence that made Marcus proud every time he witnessed it. As the event wound down and parents began collecting their exhausted offspring, Harrison pulled Marcus aside. I wanted to thank you again for that day at the park. Not just for helping Justine, but for showing me what kind of father I wanted to be. Marcus was puzzled. I'm not sure I understand. When I found Justine that night, she was waiting for me with complete faith that I would come for her. But the truth is, I'd forgotten about pickup arrangements, gotten caught up in a case that seemed more urgent than my parenting responsibilities. Seeing how you dropped everything to help a stranger's child made me realize that being a good father isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up consistently, paying attention to what matters, putting your child's needs ahead of your own convenience. The admission was more personal than Marcus had expected, but it explained the guilt he'd sensed in Harrison's behavior during their early encounters. We all make mistakes, Marcus said gently. What matters is learning from them. Exactly. And your example helped me learn something important about priorities. Harrison paused, watching Emma and Justine exchange friendship bracelets they'd made during the craft activity. Those girls have something special. I hope they stay friends. For a long time. Me too. Emma's talked about nothing but this party for a week. As they prepared to leave, Emma hugged Justine goodbye with the fierce affection of childhood friendship, promising to see her at school Monday and already making plans for their next adventure together. During the drive home, Emma chatted excitedly about every detail of the party, from the soccer ball cake to the treasure hunt prizes to the elaborate games Harrison had organized. Justine's dad is really nice, she said, as they pulled into their apartment complex. He's funny too. He told jokes during the treasure hunt that made everyone laugh. I'm glad you had fun, kiddo. Dad, can we have a party like that for my birthday? With treasure hunts and homemade cake and everything? Marcus smiled, already planning the event in his mind. Absolutely. We'll make it the best 8th birthday party in Riverside history. That evening, as Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table while he prepared dinner, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. A chance encounter with a lost child had led to a friendship between daughters, a mutual respect between fathers, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to prioritize the people who mattered most. His phone buzzed with a text message from Harrison. Thank you for bringing Emma today. Justine is still talking about having a best friend who gets soccer strategy. You're raising an exceptional young woman. Marcus typed back, thank you for including her. It means a lot to have friends who understand what single parenting looks like. Maybe we can coordinate some play dates. I think both girls would benefit from having friends whose fathers are actively involved in their lives. I'd like that. As autumn settled into winter and the soccer season gave way to indoor activities and school projects, the friendship between Emma and Justine continued to flourish. Marcus and Harrison found themselves coordinating carpools and study sessions, their initial awkwardness replaced by the practical collaboration of parents who shared similar values and challenges. The custody case that had once dominated Marcus's thoughts became a distant memory, overshadowed by the daily satisfactions of being Emma's father without restriction or supervision. Their life together had a rhythm now, a stability built on love and consistency rather than court orders and legal documents. Sometimes, late at night when Emma was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Marcus thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this point. A little girl crying alone in the rain, a father's moment of panic and gratitude, a judge who understood that justice sometimes meant recognizing humanity in unexpected places. The story could have ended differently. Sarah could have won her custody. Modification, reducing Marcus to a weekend visitor in his daughter's life. Judge Blackwell could have recused himself, leading to months of additional litigation with an unknown outcome. The ethics concerns could have been deemed serious enough to warrant disciplinary action or case dismissal. Instead, a simple act of compassion had created ripples that reached far beyond that rainy Tuesday evening at Riverside Park. Two families had found friendship in the aftermath of legal conflict. Two fathers had learned from each other's experiences. Two daughters had discovered the rare gift of friendship based on genuine understanding and shared interests. Most importantly, Emma continued to thrive in an environment where both parents remained actively engaged in her daily life, where love wasn't measured in custody percentages or visitation schedules, where the stability she needed came from knowing she was genuinely wanted and valued by everyone in her extended family. On a cold December evening, as Marcus helped Emma hang Christmas stockings in their small apartment, she looked up at him with the serious expression that meant she had something important to say. "Dad, I'm really glad you helped Justine that day at the park." "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because if you hadn't, we never would have become best friends, and you and her dad never would have become friends either. And everything would be different." Marcus knelt down to her level, struck by the wisdom in her simple observation. "You're absolutely right. Sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places." Emma nodded solemnly, then grinned. "Plus, Justine taught me how to make friendship bracelets, and now I can make them for everyone I care about." As she ran to her room to retrieve the bracelet she'd been secretly crafting for him, Marcus marveled once again at the way children could find profound meaning in simple gestures, the way they understood instinctively that kindness created connections that enriched everyone involved. The bracelet was made of blue and silver threads, Emma's favorite colors, woven together with the patient care that characterized everything she approached with genuine enthusiasm. When she tied it around his wrist, Marcus felt the weight of her love and trust, the responsibility and privilege of being her father, the infinite value of the relationship he'd fought so hard to preserve. Outside their window, snow was beginning to fall, dusting the city with the promise of winter adventures and cozy evenings spent planning Emma's science fair project and soccer strategy for next season. Inside their apartment, everything was exactly as it should be. A father and daughter building memories together, secure in the knowledge that their bond couldn't be diminished by legal challenges or adult complications. The friendship bracelet would eventually fade and fray, replaced by new tokens of affection as Emma grew and changed. But the love it represented, the family they'd fought to preserve, the connections forged through unexpected kindness, those would last forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.